Vladimir Putin travels for a summit with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi this week without fear of being arrested for Russia's war crimes in Ukraine. This is because India does not recognize the International Criminal Court, a convenient circumstance for both countries. Exactly why India, the world's largest democracy, appears blind to Russia's brutal colonial ambitions is a riddle. And very few people are better placed to solve it than my guest tonight, former Indian Foreign Secretary Nirupama Rao. Before we talk, let's look at this brief report.
It's the most populous country in the world, and now India is again playing host to a man seen by most in the West as a war criminal. These cosy smiles and handshakes are set to be repeated when Vladimir Putin meets Narendra Modi in the Russian president's first visit to the country since launching his full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. That invasion has tightened the geopolitical tightrope as Prime Minister Modi tries to maintain India's traditional non-aligned status and cosy ties with Moscow, manage the rivalry with China and boost India's international weight. Between efforts to warm ties with the European continent and the apparently close personal rapport with US President Trump, even visiting the likes of Paris and Kyiv in recent years, to laughing alongside Chinese President Xi Jinping and Putin as they forge an alliance to challenge Western democracies.
Even under the most challenging circumstances, India and Russia have always moved forward shoulder to shoulder.
Russia remains India's leading oil supplier, but shoulder to shoulder or not, Donald Trump's tariff crackdown is now squeezing Modi to downgrade his ties with Moscow. Putin's trip comes at this critical axis, rallying against Washington's pressure and pitching for India to buy more missile systems, fighter jets and Russian crude. But as the world order turns on its head, can New Delhi sit on the fence forever?
Congratulations on having done a great job. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, thank you very much for joining our program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
I have to admit that I struggled a bit with the opening question, which is usually the most difficult, but fortunately, my editor rescued me. She found your recent article in which you reflected on your time as India's top diplomat, and I quote, "I have sat across men who spoke of war as if it were weather." So do you expect Prime Minister Modi to be talking with Mr. Putin like that when they meet this week?
Let me explain to you how India looks at the current situation that all of us as human beings witness happening across the world. There is so much turbulence, not just in Europe where you are. And how does India react to this? India is in many ways an omnidirectional country at its geography, positioned very, very centrally in the Indian Ocean, but it has ties with Central Asia, it has ties with the Middle East, it reaches out into Southeast Asia. So India is a very strategically positioned country, and our foreign policy and our interests are defined by that. And therefore, when you talk about how does India look at its relationship with Russia or its relationship with the United States or with China, I would first and foremost like to tell you that we are multi-aligned, and there is a logic to it. There is a purpose to it. Because if you look at the way global interests are aligned, power runs through microchips, through undersea cables, through supply chains, through digital standards. And in this context, our compass is not only our sovereignty, but we want to remain a stable country and we want to make independent choices. So when Mr. Modi, our Prime Minister, sits down with President Putin, when the latter comes to our country later this week, you are looking at a relationship between two countries that is of very long standing and has its own strategic weight, because you look at defense collaboration, you look at space collaboration, and of course, the all-important energy ties. They've been part of this relationship for decades. So when Mr. Putin is in Delhi, He is going to talk to an India that is fully aware that the world has changed, that this cannot be a time for war, but unfortunately, we are confronted with so much conflict. And we engage with Russia not from nostalgia, let me assure you, but from a position of clarity, because we keep open our channel of communication with Russia because it serves our interests. It helps manage our security, and it keeps the space open for dialogue. But it's not a blank check. Please don't misunderstand me. It's not a blank check that we're giving Russia. We're making decisions based on our own security and our own economic needs. And our deepening partnerships with the United States, with Japan, with Europe, with the Indo-Pacific coexist with this relationship with Russia. So it's not about choosing one over the other. The message is very simple. We will speak to all sides because we want to safeguard our interests and contribute to stability where we can.
I understand that, but in Poland and Central Europe, where many see Russia as an imperial and brutal colonial power, it is really intriguing why India, the standard bearer of non-alignment but also anti-colonial policies, seems to turn a blind eye to Ukraine's suffering and its desire to be independent and sovereign, just like India did back at the beginning of the previous century.
Well, let me, tell you first and foremost that our position on the Ukraine war is rooted in principle. We respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, a country with which we have independent diplomatic relations. We want to see the protection of civilians, and we want to see a return to diplomacy. And let me tell you also, you're talking about India's position. Of course, India is not a European country. We are a member of the Global South. And here in the Global South, in the developing world, let me tell you, Poland may seem far away from there, but I'm sure you empathize with what I'm going to convey to you. There have been so many economic spillovers in food security, energy security, our fertilizer needs. All these have hit the Global South hardest. So please don't think, we have sanitized ourselves against what is happening in Ukraine. And we've always emphasized that the channels of dialogue and contact and communication must remain open, and whatever peace is finally established, it should be just and durable. So we are talking of principles here, and we are talking of a peace that should hold and that diplomacy should work. And this is where our future bets are, let me assure you.
I understand that, but at the same time, India voted in the United Nations consistently to abstain from any resolutions that would reaffirm some of these principles, United Nations principle, the right to sovereignty, criticizing Russian aggression, abstained. So, yes, I can understand why it may be beneficial to talk to everyone, but at the same time, it seems occasionally that it's not really a principled approach.
Let me once again assure you that our position is not unprincipled. We stand ready to talk to both sides, and we are always concerned not only about the protection of humanitarian principles in times of war. This is where our hearts have reached out, we have personally reached out to the Ukrainian people, and that is the position that any person in India would take. But at the same time, understand that foreign policy of a country is based on values. It's not only based on values, it is also based on strategic interests. And we have to keep the channels of communication open with a country like Russia. I'm not saying that has anything to do with abstention. The positions we have taken do not take away from our central belief that there should be respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, and that civilians should be protected, and that there should be a return to diplomacy. And both sides, Russia and Ukraine, understand this position, let me assure you.
Right. In September, Mr. Modi told Mr. Putin in China, I think, and I quote, "Mr. President, we regularly exchange opinions on the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. We welcome all recently proposed efforts to establish peace and hope all parties will approach this matter constructively. As far as we can see, Mr. Putin has not changed his position one bit from that meeting. So, according to you, can we expect Mr. Modi to be even more forceful this time around when he speaks with Mr. Putin?
I am sure that Mr. Modi will very emphatically and with great clarity convey what he has been saying before to President Putin, and also emphasize our continuing very deep concerns about the situation between Russia and Ukraine. We have never been advocates for war and conflict and territorial, the disturbance of the principles of territorial integrity and sovereignty. That is a central principle. And secondly, we have always said that whatever peace is established, it should be credible, it should be sustainable, it should not be, something that is a quick fix. We need sustainable peace that has to be built with Ukraine. I'm sure that is what the Prime Minister will tell the President of Russia. Sustainable peace must be built with Ukraine, not over Ukraine.
Right. So let me put it differently. It seems that Mr. Trump's efforts to be peacemaker in Ukraine are not going very well, judging by the results of the visit in Moscow of his representatives. China, many analysts are saying China is not really interested in this war ending because they benefit both from Russia's weakness and its business and make Russia more dependent on itself. And it also helps China put pressure on Western Europe. So just to finish this thread, can Mr. Modi assume the role of the peacemaker in chief?
I think India would always be willing to contribute in any way possible, provided both sides involved in this conflict would want it to contribute its support and its involvement in any peace process. I'm sure India would not stand back. As I said, India is a peace-loving country, and India wants to see a sustainable peace that is built with Ukraine. And anything that we can do in that context, I'm sure India would be prepared to do.
You're very diplomatic today with me, which, could be expected given your experience. But I also saw a post you put on Twitter where you said, "It makes me sick at heart to see us, India, give the impression, at least of holding a brief for Putin's actions, and to contort ourselves into all kinds of shapes to sound right thinking and upright. India deserves to do better." What did you mean by that?
Well, I certainly have been an advocate constantly for being that voice for peace and for sobriety and for forethought in whatever actions countries take against each other, whether it's Russia, whether it's Ukraine. And in that context, I've been a voice in my own nation for us to be able to speak out on these issues. And that was where I was coming from. But that doesn't in any way detract from the position I've just conveyed to you, that at this time of the conflict, when people are talking about negotiations between Russia and Ukraine and the United States is involved, I don't want to comment on American policy making. That is really not my remit or my responsibility. But I think India, if I was in a policy making position, I would certainly, and that is my advice certainly to Delhi, that we must advocate a ceasefire between the two sides that is legitimate, that is enforceable. We must work towards a sustainable peace, and all of us, members of the global community, especially middle powers like India, should be able to contribute in whatever way possible to making this a reality.
All right, thank you for this explanation. I think at least I understand it better than before. I just wanted to say that, would like to broaden out to the entire relationship of India with other powers, particularly in Asia. Just ahead of the talks this week, the Russians have said they not only want to make new arms and food deals with hundreds of billions of dollars, but they also were seeking to upgrade the relationship with India to some kind of unlimited partnership that they now have also with China. Is this an attempt by Russia to bring India firmly into the China, Russia, and anti-Western alliance of sorts?
Well, that you will have, that's a question you need to ask the Russians. But if I am,
Well, how do you read this, if they make statements like
what
this?
I instinctively feel about the position that India would take, and India would always seek balance. India does not look in terms or think in terms of binaries. It will seek autonomy, it will seek independence, it will seek resilience, and it will always, the question of issue-based coalitions, multi-platform engagement, that is what India's strategy is about. If you were to ask me, what is India's future strategy going to be? It's going to rest on 4 pillars, if I may say so. It's going to rest on technology power, which is all that you hear about AI and quantum and space and semiconductors and cyber. It will rest on economic resilience, diversification is the name of the game. Diversified supply chains, secure energy and manufacturing, diplomatic flexibility, and that's where issue-based coalitions come in and multi-platform engagement comes in. And we want to deliver the best solutions for our people. Nobody can dictate policy to us.
Right. Unlike Russia, with whom India has had, as you mentioned and as we saw in our material, a long relationship and mostly friendly, the United States had a bit of a rocky relationship, at least after the Cold War, or during the Cold War. And then after the Cold War, relations with Washington improved. You were ambassador to Washington, so you know what I'm talking about. And this extended into military cooperation. India is part of the Quad format with Japan, Australia, US. So this sort of chimes in with what you just described. But now some Indian analysts that I've read are saying that the Trump administration's decision to impose steep tariffs on oil imports from Russia has permanently damaged trust in the United States, and that makes pivot towards Russia and China inevitable. What would you say to that?
Well, I would certainly disabuse them of such thoughts because I really and very deeply believe that the partnership between India and the United States is wide, it's deep, it's strategically important. It's true that during the second Trump presidency, since January this year, there has been some volatility in the relationship, and I call it whiplash diplomacy. There's been a bit of whiplash diplomacy from the United States. We've had Mr. Trump's tariff threats, and we've had his criticism of India's purchases of Russian oil. So in that sense, I've been an advocate of the need to build guardrails around the relationship. Because, why do I say that? Firstly, the United States is India's most crucial strategic partner. It's true that we've had a troublesome phase in this relationship over the last few months, but if you look at the response from Prime Minister Modi and the government, and by and large public opinion, there's been a lot of steadiness and calm in the way India has reacted to it, because we really want, and I'd like to emphasize this, we want to protect long-term cooperation in defense, in technology, in the Indo-Pacific. You mentioned Quad, and we want to de-link episodic disagreements from the wider relationship. And why do I say that? India approaches the United States as a partner. The US is not a pole for us. Please understand that. I'm not punning on Poland or anything, but I'm talking of the United States as a partner, not a pole, not a pillar in that sense. So strategic trust and strategic autonomy coexist in this relationship. And, if no country can pressure India, whether it's Russia, whether it's the United States, or whether it's China, because we do not act under pressure. We are too large and independent and self-respecting a country to act under pressure. And our approach is plural. The United States is certainly a partner, but it's not the entire architecture of our strategic definition of global affairs today. And in mature partnerships, yes, friction is normal, but it's the sense of direction that we have rather than, the moments that we are going through now. So I'd like to put that in context. You talked about what certain opinion makers in India have been saying. I would like to offer this counter.
Right. So now maybe we can engage in some futurology just to depart a little from the short-term whiplash diplomacy, as you said. Under the big picture view, many analysts are saying that America is basically withdrawing to the Western Hemisphere. So basically giving Russia and China sway over Europe. So now the question is how India views that. And pardon me for maybe speaking a bit longer on this, but Orwell saw that in his novel. He divided the world into three rivaling empires: Oceania, so the US, Britain, and perhaps South America; Eurasia, where Western Europe would be part of that Eurasia; and then East Asia. And it's not entirely clear to me if he meant just China and Japan and something else. And of course, everybody is wondering, anyone who subscribes to this or views this says, so where is India?
You're referring to Orwell's 1984, and Orwell had a very deep knowledge of India. I think he lived in the India-Burma area during the early part of his life. And you talked about how the future should look. And we're talking today of a world that seems to be fracturing in many ways. And I would like to bring in the importance of Europe for India in this context. In many ways, Europe has become India's new strategic frontier. For many years, this relationship, had not fulfilled its potential. But today, after the Ukraine war, you're rearming, Europe is rearming, you are reassessing China, and you're pursuing resilience in supply chains and energy and technology, just as India seeks to do. So there's a lot of opportunity in the pivot that Europe is making today. That's how India sees it. Because you are searching in Europe for new strategic anchors in a world where American politics has become unpredictable. I think we'll all grant that. And India fits naturally into this picture as far as Europe is concerned. I'm leaving Orwell aside for now, because our interests today converge in advanced technology, in defense manufacturing, in supply chain diversification, in green energy and climate action, most important, and also the very vital India-Middle East-Europe economic corridor. So I think when India looks at Europe, we don't see geopolitical baggage. We see all the convergence of interests that I spoke about. And what does India offer to Europe? We offer scale, we offer trust, we offer democratic stability, and we are a counterweight to China, if I may say that, as diplomatically as possible. So we are not choosing Europe instead of the US. We'd like to choose both because we would like multiple strong partnerships.
But that would imply, everything you've said would imply that actually India in principle gravitates towards Western democracies, be it Europe or be it the United States.
Well, certainly I think our values converge in many ways, and the long historical connections that India has had with Europe and then later with America define that arc of the relationship, if I may say. So, as I said, we are not in any camp. We don't believe in binaries. We will always act independently, but we will act with flexibility because every issue that comes before us requires a response that is dictated by our national interest and the needs of our people. Look at India, a country of 1.4 billion people. You have to come to India to understand the meaning of human life, if I may say that. You have to come here to see not only the teeming millions, but their dreams, their interests, what they need. They look too for their future. And that is really what any elected government, it's not a question of India gravitating towards to the Western democracies. We are a democracy, period. We are a vibrant, functioning, resilient democracy. And that is what the West needs to understand. To every young person in the West, I say, come to India. It's the place of every arrival.
Madam Secretary, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
This was all we've got for you in On the Record today. Join us next week.